Millionaire humiliates a little beggar girl at the church door and shouts, "Get out, I won't give you anything." What happens next leaves the millionaire completely devastated. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The crisp autumn air swirled around Leonardo Alencar as he strode purposefully down the steps of St. Michael's Church. His tailored suit and polished shoes gleamed in the late afternoon sun, a stark contrast to the weathered stone facade of the century-old building. He barely noticed the vibrant fall colors adorning the trees lining the street, his mind already racing with plans for his next business conquest. As CEO of Alencar Industries, Leonardo had built an empire on shrewd decisions and cutthroat tactics. At 35, he was at the pinnacle of success, with a net worth that made headlines and a reputation that struck both awe and fear in the hearts of his competitors. His piercing blue eyes, usually cold and calculating, now held a hint of satisfaction as he replayed the meeting he'd just concluded with the church board. Another charity gala in the bag, he muttered to himself, reaching for his phone to check the stream of notifications that never seemed to cease. The publicity from these events was always good for business, even if he couldn't care less about the causes they supported. Lost in thought, Leonardo almost didn't notice the small figure that darted into his path. He halted abruptly, an irritated scowl forming on his face as he looked down at the source of the interruption. A young girl, no more than 10 years old, stood before him. Her curly brown hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her clothes, while clean, were clearly well worn. But it was her eyes that caught Leonardo off guard, large, dark, and filled with an intensity that seemed beyond her years. "Excuse me, mister," the girl said, her voice clear and unwavering. "Could you spare some change? My family—" Leonardo cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Out of my way, kid. I'm not giving you anything." The girl didn't budge. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him with those unsettling eyes. "I know who you are," she said quietly, "but you don't know who you really are." For a moment, Leonardo felt as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. He blinked, taken aback by the strange statement, but in an instant his usual mask of indifference slipped back into place. "Listen, little girl," he snapped. "I don't have time for games. Go bother someone else." With that, he brushed past her, his long strides carrying him swiftly toward the sleek black car waiting at the curb. As he reached for the door handle, he heard the girl's voice once more. "My name is Sophia," she called out. "Remember that, Mr. Alencar. You'll want to know it later." Leonardo paused for a fraction of a second, a chill running down his spine despite the warmth of the afternoon. Then, shaking off the odd feeling, he climbed into the car and slammed the door shut. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, Leonardo found himself glancing back at the church steps. The girl, Sophia, still stood there, watching him leave. He turned away, pushing the encounter from his mind. He had more important things to focus on. The car wound its way through the city streets, the familiar skyscrapers of downtown looming ahead. Leonardo's phone buzzed incessantly, and he welcomed the distraction, diving back into the world he knew best: deals, acquisitions, and the relentless pursuit of more. By the time he reached his penthouse apartment that evening, the strange encounter with the girl was all but forgotten. Leonardo poured himself a glass of expensive scotch and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city he'd conquered. As he sipped his drink, his eyes fell on a framed photo on the nearby shelf, a much younger version of himself standing beside an older man with the same piercing blue eyes. Carlos Alencar, his father and the founder of Alencar Industries, looked as stern and unyielding in the photo as he had been in life. "I've done it, Dad," Leonardo murmured, raising his glass in a mock toast. "Everything you wanted, everything you said I could be. Are you proud now?" The photo, of course, remained silent. Leonardo turned away, draining his glass in one long swallow. He had never been able to shake the feeling that no matter how much he achieved, it would never be enough to truly earn his father's approval. Pushing aside the unwelcome thoughts, Leonardo strode to his home office. There was work to be done, always more work. He immersed himself in reports and projections, letting the familiar world of numbers and strategies wash away the lingering unease from the day's strange events. Hours passed, the city lights twinkling far below as night fell. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that Leonardo finally closed his laptop and headed to bed. As he drifted off to sleep, a pair of dark, knowing eyes flashed through his mind, accompanied by words that echoed with an unsettling clarity. "I know who you are, but you don't know who you really are." Leonardo's dreams that night were troubled, filled with shadowy figures and half-remembered voices. He tossed and turned, unable to shake the feeling that something fundamental was shifting, that the carefully constructed world he had built was somehow balanced on the edge of a precipice. When he awoke the next morning, Leonardo dismissed the lingering unease as nothing more than the result of too much work and not enough sleep. He went through his usual routine, an intense workout, a precisely calculated breakfast, a series of early morning calls to his international offices. Yet as he prepared to leave for another day of meetings and deal-making, Leonardo found himself pausing at the mirror in his foyer. For just a moment, he saw not the polished, successful businessman he had become, but a lost little boy searching for something he couldn't quite name. Shaking his head to clear the unsettling image, Leonardo straightened his tie and squared his shoulders. He was Leonardo Alencar, one of the most powerful men in the city. Nothing and no one could shake the foundations of the life he had built. As he strode out of his penthouse, Leonardo had no way of knowing that the encounter on the church steps was just the beginning. The carefully constructed facade of his life was about to crumble, and the journey to discover his true self was only just beginning. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and the usual frenetic pace of Leonardo's life. Yet, despite his best efforts to focus solely on business, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. The girl's words on the church steps kept resurfacing in his mind at the most inopportune moments, disrupting his usually razor-sharp concentration. It was during a crucial board meeting that things took an unexpected turn. Leonardo was in the middle of presenting his latest acquisition plan when his personal assistant, Marcos, quietly entered the room and placed a plain white envelope on the table in front of him. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Alencar," Marcos said softly, "but this was just delivered by courier. It's marked urgent and personal." Leonardo frowned, annoyed at the disruption. He was about to set the envelope aside when something made him pause. There was no return address, no indication of its origin. Against his better judgment, he found himself reaching for it. "If you'll excuse me for a moment," he said to the room, his tone brooking no argument. The board members exchanged glances but remained silent as Leonardo stepped out into the hallway. With an inexplicable sense of trepidation, he tore open the envelope. Inside was a single photograph, yellowed with age. Leonardo's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the image. It showed a young couple, smiling broadly as they stood in front of a modest house. The man was holding a beautifully crafted wooden rocking chair, his expression one of pride and accomplishment. But it was the woman who captured Leonardo's attention. She was pregnant, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly, and her face, it was like looking in a mirror. The same high cheekbones, the same shaped eyes that were a warm, rich brown, not the icy blue that Leonardo saw every day in his own reflection. On the back of the photo, written in faded ink, were the words, "Clara and João with João's prize-winning chair. Baby due any day now." Leonardo's hands shook as he turned the photo over again, studying every detail. Who were these people? And why did the woman look so much like him? A soft chime from his phone snapped him back to reality. He had been standing in the hallway for nearly 10 minutes. Stuffing the photo back into the envelope, Leonardo took a deep breath and straightened his tie. He had a meeting to finish, but as he stepped back into the boardroom, the polished mask he usually wore felt fragile, like it might crack at any moment. He stumbled through the rest of the presentation, his mind elsewhere. The board members exchanged worried glances, unused to seeing their usually unflappable CEO so distracted. As soon as the meeting ended, Leonardo retreated to his office, instructing Marcos to hold all his calls. He pulled out the photo again, studying it intently. There had to be some explanation, some reason why this had been sent to him. Almost without thinking, he found himself reaching for his phone, pulling up a search engine. He hesitated for a moment, then typed in the names from the back of the photo, Clara and João. To his surprise, several results popped up. Most were old newspaper articles from a small town several hours away. Leonardo's eyes widened as he read the headlines. Local carpenter João Silva wins Regional Craftsmanship Award. Tragedy strikes. João Silva perishes in workshop fire. Widow Clara Silva vows to keep husband's legacy alive. The dates on the articles spanned a period of about 5 years, ending just over 3 decades ago. Leonardo's heart raced as he realized that the timing aligned perfectly with his own birth. As he scrolled through the articles, a notification popped up on his screen, an email from an unknown sender. With a sense of foreboding, Leonardo opened it. The message was brief. The truth will set you free, but first it will shatter everything you thought you knew. Are you ready to learn who you really are, Leonardo Alencar? Or should I say Leonardo Silva? Leonardo stared at the screen, his mind reeling. Silva. The same surname as the couple in the photo. It couldn't be a coincidence. Just then, there was a soft knock at his office door. Marcos entered, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Alencar, but there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent and that you'll want to hear what she has to say." "I told you to hold all my appointments," Leonardo snapped, his nerves frayed. Marcos shifted uncomfortably. "I know, sir, but, well, she's very insistent. And she says her name is Clara." Leonardo felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. Clara. The name from the photo, from the articles. It couldn't be. "Send her in," he heard himself say, his voice sounding distant and unfamiliar. Moments later, an older woman entered the office. Her hair was grey now, and lines of worry and hardship etched her face. But her eyes, those were the same eyes that had looked out from the old photograph. The same eyes that Leonardo had seen in the mirror every day of his life, even if he had never truly noticed their color before. "Hello, Leonardo," the woman said softly. "I'm Clara, and I think it's time we had a long overdue conversation about who you really are." Leonardo gripped the edge of his desk, feeling as if the world was tilting on its axis. Everything he had ever known, everything he had built his life upon, suddenly felt like a house of cards ready to collapse. "Who am I?" he managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara's eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "You're my son," she said simply. "And it's time for you to learn the truth about your past, about the family you never knew you had." As Clara began to speak, Leonardo felt as if he was standing on the edge of a precipice. The life he had known was crumbling around him, and he had no idea what lay on the other side of this revelation. All he knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. The empire he had built, the identity he had crafted so carefully, it was all based on a lie. And as Clara's words washed over him, Leonardo realized that the journey to discovering his true self was only just beginning. Outside the office windows, the city skyline stretched out before him, a testament to all he had achieved. But for the first time in his life, Leonardo Alencar, or Leonardo Silva, felt completely and utterly lost. Leonardo stared at Clara, his mind reeling from the bombshell she had just dropped. The opulent office that had always been his sanctuary now felt suffocating. The symbols of his success nothing more than hollow reminders of a life built on lies. "My son," he repeated, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. That's impossible. I'm Leonardo Alencar. My father is Carlos Alencar. This has to be some kind of mistake." Clara's eyes, so eerily similar to his own, filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "I know this is hard to believe, Leonardo, but it's the truth. The night you were born, there was a terrible mistake at the hospital. The Alencar's baby. He didn't survive. And Carlos, She paused, taking a deep breath. "He made a decision that changed all our lives forever." Leonardo's head spun. He gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles turning white. "You're saying Carlos Alencar stole me? From you?" Clara nodded slowly. "He used his influence, his money. The hospital staff was paid off. By the time I realized what had happened, it was too late. You were gone, and the Alencars had left the country." A wave of nausea washed over Leonardo. He stumbled to the window, staring out at the city he had always believed he was born to conquer. Now it all felt like a mirage, shimmering and insubstantial. "Why now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why come forward after all these years?" Clara stepped closer, her reflection appearing beside his in the glass. "Because you deserve to know the truth. Because I've never stopped looking for you, hoping that one day I'd find a way to reach you. And because," She hesitated, then continued, "Because your sister needs you." Leonardo whirled around, his eyes wide. "Sister? I have a sister?" Clara nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "Sophia. She's the one who finally found a way to contact you. She's been researching, piecing together the puzzle for years." The image of the little girl on the church steps flashed through Leonardo's mind. Her knowing eyes, her cryptic words. It all suddenly made sense. "Sophia," he murmured. "She said I didn't know who I really was." "She's always been perceptive, our Sophia," Clara said softly. "She never gave up hope that we'd find you someday." Leonardo's mind raced, trying to reconcile this new reality with everything he had ever known. A part of him wanted to deny it all, to throw Clara out of his office and pretend this conversation had never happened. But deep down, he knew. The resemblance was undeniable, and it explained so much. The nagging feeling of not quite belonging that had haunted him his entire life. The constant need to prove himself worthy of the Alencar name. I need time to process this," he said, running a hand through his hair. "This is all too much." Clara nodded understandingly. "Of course. I know it's a lot to take in. But Leonardo, please don't shut us out. We've waited so long for this moment." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn notebook. "This was your father's, your real father's. João kept a journal of all his woodworking projects, his dreams, his plans for our family. I want you to have it." Leonardo took the notebook with trembling hands. The leather cover was soft with age, the pages yellowed and filled with neat, cramped handwriting. As he flipped through it, his eye caught a sketch of a beautifully designed crib with a note scrawled in the margin. "For our little Leonardo. May he grow up surrounded by beauty and love." A lump formed in Leonardo's throat. This man, this stranger, had dreamed of him, had planned for his future with such care and hope, and he had never known. I need some time," Leonardo said again, his voice hoarse. "Please, can you leave your contact information with my assistant? I'll be in touch." Clara looked like she wanted to say more, but she simply nodded. "Of course. We'll be waiting, Leonardo. Whenever you're ready." She placed a small card on his desk and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "Just remember, no matter what, you are loved. You always have been." As the door closed behind her, Leonardo sank into his chair, feeling as if the weight of the world had settled on his shoulders. He stared at the notebook in his hands, at the card on his desk. Tangible proof of a life, a family, he had never known existed. His phone buzzed incessantly, reminders of meetings and deadlines that suddenly seemed trivial. With a swift motion, Leonardo switched it off. For the first time in as long as he could remember, the driven businessman felt completely and utterly lost. Hours passed as Leonardo sat in his office, poring over João's notebook, reading and rereading the articles about the Silva family he had found online. The more he learned, the more he felt a connection to these strangers who were, apparently, his true family. As night fell, Leonardo found himself standing in front of the large family portrait that hung in the main hall of the Alencar mansion. He stared at the face of Carlos Alencar, the man he had always believed to be his father. The stern eyes, the proud set of his jaw, features Leonardo had spent a lifetime trying to emulate. "Why?" he whispered to the portrait. "Why did you do it?" But the painted figure remained silent, its secrets locked away behind a mask of aristocratic disdain. Leonardo turned away, his gaze falling on a small framed photo on a nearby table. It showed a much younger version of himself, maybe 5 or 6 years old, sitting on Carlos's lap. Despite the formal pose, there was a genuine smile on the boy's face, a look of adoration directed at the man he believed to be his father. With a sudden surge of emotion, Leonardo swept the photo off the table. It crashed to the floor, glass shattering. In that broken reflection, Leonardo saw the fragments of his own identity, splintered and scattered. As he stood there, surrounded by the trappings of a life that no longer felt like his own, Leonardo made a decision. He couldn't simply ignore this revelation. He needed answers, needed to understand who he truly was. With newfound determination, he pulled out his phone and dialed the number on Clara's card. It rang once, twice, before a familiar young voice answered. "Hello?" Leonardo took a deep breath. "Sophia, this is Leonardo. I think it's time we talked." As he spoke those words, Leonardo felt something shift inside him. The journey to discover his true self had begun, and there was no turning back now. The modest two-story house stood in stark contrast to the opulent mansions Leonardo was accustomed to. Paint peeled from the wooden siding, and the small front yard was more dandelions than grass. Yet as he sat in his luxury car, parked across the street, Leonardo felt more intimidated than he ever had walking into a high-stakes business meeting. Sophia's words echoed in his mind. "Just come as you are. We want to meet the real you, not the CEO." Taking a deep breath, Leonardo stepped out of the car. He had forgone his usual tailored suit for jeans and a simple button-down shirt, but he still felt overdressed, out of place in this working-class neighborhood. Before he could even reach the front door, it swung open. Sophia stood there, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "You came," she exclaimed, as if she had half expected him to change his mind. Leonardo managed a small smile. "I said I would, didn't I?" Sophia grinned. "Yes, but saying and doing are different things. Come on in, everyone's waiting." As he stepped inside, Leonardo was enveloped by the rich aroma of home cooking. The house was small but tidy, filled with mismatched furniture that somehow worked together to create a cozy atmosphere. Family photos lined the walls, and Leonardo found himself searching the faces for similarities, for echoes of his own features. Clara emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "Leonardo," she said warmly, "welcome home." The word home hit Leonardo like a physical blow. This place, these people, they were supposed to be his home. Yet everything felt foreign, uncomfortable. "Thank you for having me," he replied stiffly, unsure of how to act, what to say. Two young men appeared behind Clara, both bearing a strong resemblance to the man in the old photograph, João. They were looking at Leonardo with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "These are your brothers," Clara said softly. "Mateus and Julio." Leonardo nodded awkwardly. Brothers. The word felt strange, unfamiliar. He had grown up an only child and now suddenly he had siblings. "Nice to meet you," he managed to say. Mateus, the older of the two, stepped forward. "So you're the long-lost Alencar heir, huh? Must be quite a change, slumming it with us common folk." "Mateus," Clara admonished, but Leonardo held up a hand. "It's all right," he said. "I understand this is unusual for all of us." Julio, the younger brother, seemed more welcoming. "Don't mind Mateus," he said with a small smile. "He's always been a bit of a hothead. Come on, let's sit down. Mama's been cooking all day for this." As they gathered around the small dining table, Leonardo felt increasingly out of his depth. The easy banter between the siblings, the way Clara seemed to anticipate everyone's needs. It was a family dynamic he had never experienced. "So, Leonardo," Clara began as she served a hearty portion of feijoada onto his plate, "tell us about yourself. What do you like to do when you're not running your big company?" Leonardo blinked, caught off guard by the question. What did he like to do? He realized with a start that he couldn't remember the last time he had done anything purely for enjoyment. I work out," he said lamely, "and I read business journals." An awkward silence fell over the table. Sophia, ever the peacemaker, jumped in. "That sounds interesting. Maybe you could teach us some business stuff sometime. I've always wanted to learn more about it." Leonardo felt a rush of gratitude towards the young girl. "I'd like that," he said softly. As the meal progressed, Leonardo found himself relaxing slightly. He listened as Mateus talked about his job as a mechanic, as Julio shared funny stories from his college classes. It was a world so different from his own, yet he found himself oddly fascinated. After dinner, as Clara and Sophia cleared the dishes, Mateus pulled Leonardo aside. "Look," he said gruffly, "I know this isn't easy for you. It's not easy for us either. But you're family, whether we like it or not. Just don't expect everything to be perfect right away, okay?" Leonardo nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "I appreciate that," he said quietly. As the evening drew to a close, Clara pressed a small photo album into Leonardo's hands. "I want you to have this," she said. "It's got pictures of João, of all of us. Your history, Leonardo. Take it. Look through it when you're ready." Leonardo clutched the album, feeling the weight of years, of memories he had never known. "Thank you," he managed to say. As he prepared to leave, Sophia hugged him impulsively. "Come back soon, okay? We have a lot of catching up to do." Leonardo found himself smiling genuinely for the first time that evening. "I will," he promised. Driving back to his penthouse, Leonardo's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The Alencar mansion, with its cold grandeur, had never felt less like home. Yet the warmth of the Silver household, while appealing, also felt overwhelming, almost suffocating in its unfamiliarity. He was caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. As he walked into his empty penthouse, Leonardo realized that the journey to find himself, to reconcile these two vastly different parts of his life, was going to be far more challenging than he had imagined. Sitting on his leather couch, Leonardo opened the photo album Clara had given him. As he flipped through the pages, seeing snapshots of birthdays, Christmases, family vacations, all the moments he should have been part of, he felt an ache in his chest that no amount of wealth or success had ever been able to fill. On the last page was a photo of João working in his woodshop. The man's eyes, so like Leonardo's own, seemed to stare out from the image, full of warmth and creativity. Leonardo traced the outline of his biological father's face, wondering what life might have been like if things had been different. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Leonardo made a decision. He couldn't simply go back to his old life, pretending this revelation hadn't shaken him to his core. But he also couldn't abandon everything he had worked for, everything he had built. He would find a way to bridge these two worlds, to discover who Leonardo Silva Alencar truly was. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in his life, Leonardo felt he was on the path to something real, something meaningful. With that resolve, he finally drifted off to sleep, the photo album clutched to his chest, a tangible link to the family he was only just beginning to know. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Leonardo's penthouse, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. He stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie with practiced precision. But as he met his own gaze, he paused, struck by how different he looked to himself now. The face staring back at him was the same one he'd seen every day for years, yet it felt like he was seeing it for the first time. The high cheekbones, the shape of his eyes, features he'd always attributed to some distant Alencar ancestor, now spoke of a different heritage altogether. His phone buzzed insistently, reminding him of the board meeting scheduled for that morning. Leonardo took a deep breath, steeling himself. He had a multi-billion-dollar company to run, regardless of his personal turmoil. As he strode into the boardroom, Leonardo felt the weight of expectant gazes. He'd been distracted lately, and people had noticed. Whispers of concern had begun to circulate among the shareholders. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, his voice steady despite the tumult in his mind, "thank you for joining me this morning. We have much to discuss." For the next 2 hours, Leonardo immersed himself in projections, strategies, and market analyses. It was familiar territory, a world he had mastered long ago. Yet even as he spoke confidently of expansion plans and profit margins, a part of him felt disconnected, as if he were watching himself perform from a distance. As the meeting drew to a close, Marcus, his CFO, approached him with a furrowed brow. "Leonardo, is everything all right? You seem different lately." Leonardo forced a smile. "Everything's fine, Marcus. Just been doing some thinking about the future, that's all." Marcus didn't look convinced, but he nodded and left Leonardo alone with his thoughts. Back in his office, Leonardo found himself staring at the family photo on his desk. The Alencar family photo. He picked it up, studying Carlos's stern features, searching for any hint of guilt or deceit in the man who had raised him. A soft knock at the door interrupted his reverie. "Mr. Alencar," his assistant called, "there's a young woman here to see you. She says her name is Sophia and that she's your sister." Leonardo's heart skipped a beat. Sophia, here, in his corporate world. "Send her in," he said, quickly replacing the photo on his desk. Sophia bounced into the office, her eyes wide as she took in the opulent surroundings. "Wow," she breathed. "This is like something out of a movie." Despite himself, Leonardo felt a smile tugging at his lips. "It's just an office, Sophia. What are you doing here?" Sophia's expression grew serious. "I wanted to see where you work, to understand your world a little better, and, well, Mum wanted me to invite you to dinner again. She's worried you might be pulling away." Leonardo sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Sophia, it's not that simple. I have responsibilities here, a life I've built." "A life built on lies," Sophia interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "I know it's hard, Leo, but you can't just ignore us, ignore who you really are. The use of the nickname Leo caught him off guard. No one had ever called him that before. It felt strangely right coming from Sofia. Before Leonardo could respond, the door burst open. Carlos Alencar stormed in, his face a mask of fury. "What is the meaning of this?" he thundered, glaring at Sofia. "Who are you and what are you doing in my son's office?" Leonardo felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. "Carlos," he began, but Sofia cut him off. "I'm his sister," she said, standing tall despite Carlos's intimidating presence. His real sister. Carlos's face paled, his eyes darting between Sofia and Leonardo. "What nonsense is this?" he demanded, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Leonardo took a deep breath, feeling as if he were standing on the edge of a precipice. "It's not nonsense, Carlos. It's the truth. I know what you did, what you've been hiding all these years." For a moment, Carlos looked like he might collapse, then his face hardened. "Whatever you think you know, you're mistaken. This girl is clearly trying to exploit you, Leonardo. I raised you, I made you who you are." "You stole me!" Leonardo shouted, years of pent-up emotions suddenly bursting forth. "You took me from my real family, my real life." The office fell silent, the weight of the accusation hanging heavy in the air. Carlos's shoulders sagged, the fight seeming to drain out of him. "I did what I thought was best," he said quietly. "For you, for our family name." Sofia stepped forward, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Mr. Alencar, I know you thought you were doing the right thing, but Leonardo deserves to know his true heritage, to know the family that's been missing him all these years." Carlos looked at her, then back at Leonardo. For the first time in Leonardo's memory, he saw tears in the old man's eyes. "I never meant to hurt you," Carlos whispered. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you, of our family line ending." Leonardo felt a complex mix of emotions swirling within him. Anger, confusion, and a strange sort of pity for the man he had always called father. "Carlos," he said, his voice hoarse, "I need time to process all of this, but I can't just pretend it didn't happen. I need to explore this part of myself, to get to know my biological family." Carlos nodded slowly, looking suddenly old and frail. "I understand," he said. "Just don't forget that I love you, Leonardo. You'll always be my son no matter what." As Carlos shuffled out of the office, Leonardo felt as if a chapter of his life was closing. He turned to Sofia, who was watching him with a mixture of concern and hope. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said. Sofia shook her head. "Don't be. It needed to happen." "So, about that dinner?" Leonardo couldn't help but chuckle. "You don't give up, do you?" "Nope," Sofia grinned. "It's a Silva family trait. You'll learn that soon enough." As they left the office together, Leonardo felt as if he were stepping into a new world. The corporate skyscraper that had been his domain for so long now felt like a gilded cage. And for the first time, he was eager to escape it, to explore the simpler, warmer world that Sofia and her family, his family, represented. The journey ahead would be challenging, fraught with difficult conversations and painful revelations. But as he looked at Sofia's beaming face, Leonardo felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps in finding his true family, he would finally find himself as well. The old workshop stood at the edge of town, a weathered wooden structure that seemed to sag under the weight of memories. Leonardo hesitated at the entrance, his hand hovering over the rusted doorknob. This place had been his father's sanctuary, the birthplace of João Silva's renowned craftsmanship. "It's okay," Sofia said softly beside him. "Take your time." Drawing a deep breath, Leonardo pushed the door open. The scent of sawdust and aged wood enveloped him, stirring something deep within his soul. Shafts of sunlight filtered through dusty windows, illuminating workbenches and tools frozen in time. Leonardo moved slowly through the space, his fingers trailing over the rough surfaces of half-finished projects. Each piece seemed to whisper stories of the man who had lovingly crafted them. "Dad used to spend hours here," Sofia explained, her voice filled with a mixture of pride and sadness. Even after a long day at his regular job, he'd come out here and work on his designs. He always said that true art came from the heart, not from a paycheck. Leonardo nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He could almost see João bent over these workbenches, pouring his passion into every curve and joint. It was a world away from the sterile boardrooms and glittering galas that had defined Leonardo's life. In the corner, a tarp-covered shape caught his eye. "What's that?" he asked, Sophia's eyes lit up. "Oh, that's Dad's last project. He never got to finish it." She pulled away the tarp, revealing an intricately carved rocking chair. Even unfinished, its beauty was undeniable. Leonardo ran his hand over the smooth armrest, marveling at the skill evident in every detail. "It's incredible," he murmured. "Mum always said you inherited Dad's eye for detail," Sophia said with a smile. "Want to try finishing it?" Leonardo blinked in surprise. "Me? But I don't know how." Sophia shrugged. "Dad always said the wood knows what it wants to be. You just have to listen to it. Besides, I think it would mean a lot to Mum if you finished what Dad started." Hesitantly, Leonardo picked up a nearby chisel. It felt foreign in his hand, so different from the sleek pens he was accustomed to wielding in million-dollar deals. Yet as he tentatively began to work, guided by Sophia's encouragement and the notes left in Joan's journal, something awakened within him. Hours slipped by unnoticed as Leonardo lost himself in the work. His suit jacket lay discarded, his crisp white shirt speckled with sawdust. For the first time in years, the constant buzz of emails and phone calls faded into the background, replaced by the rhythmic scrape of tools against wood. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the workshop, Leonardo stepped back to survey his progress. The chair was far from perfect. There were rough edges and slightly misaligned joints that betrayed his inexperience. Yet looking at it, Leonardo felt a sense of accomplishment that no business deal had ever given him. "Leo," Sophia said softly, using the nickname that was beginning to feel natural. "It's beautiful." Leonardo smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that transformed his usually serious face. "It's not finished yet," he said, "but I think I'd like to keep working on it." Sophia beamed. Dad would be so proud. As they cleaned up the workshop, Leonardo's phone buzzed insistently. Messages from his assistant, reminders of meetings and deadlines, all clamored for his attention. But for once, Leonardo found he didn't care. "Sophia," he said as they locked up the workshop, "do you think Mom would mind if I came by more often? To work on the chair, I mean." Sophia's eyes sparkled with joy. "Are you kidding? She'd love it. And you know there's a lot more of Dad's unfinished projects in there, enough to keep you busy for a long time." As they drove back to the Silver home, Leonardo felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The complex world of corporate politics and high finance suddenly seemed less important, less real, than the simple act of creating something with his own hands. Dinner at the Silver household that night was a lively affair. Leonardo, still dusted with sawdust, regaled the family with tales of his first foray into woodworking. Mateus and Julio, initially skeptical of their long-lost brother, found themselves warming to him as they saw this new, more vulnerable side. Clara watched it all with tears in her eyes. "You look so much like your father right now," she said softly to Leonardo. He had that same look of joy when he was creating. As the evening wound down, Leonardo found himself reluctant to leave. The warmth of the Silver home, so different from the cold elegance of his penthouse, called to something deep within him. "You know," Clara said as she walked him to his car, "João always said that a person's true character is revealed in the things they create with their hands. I think he would be very proud of the man you're becoming, Leonardo." Leonardo felt a tightness in his chest, a mixture of grief for the father he never knew and gratitude for the family he was just beginning to understand. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for everything." As he drove home that night, Leonardo's mind was awash with new possibilities. The rocking chair in the workshop had awakened something in him, a connection to João and to a part of himself he had never known existed. For the first time, Leonardo began to see a future that wasn't defined solely by boardrooms and balance sheets. It was a future where family dinners and sawdust-filled weekends held as much importance as business meetings and corporate acquisitions. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still unresolved issues with Carlos, a company to run, and a lifetime of habits to overcome. But as he fell asleep that night, the scent of wood shavings still clinging to his skin, Leonardo felt a sense of hope and purpose that had been missing from his life for far too long. In his dreams, he saw João Silva, working side by side with him in the old workshop, guiding his hands as they brought beauty out of raw wood. And for the first time in years, Leonardo slept with a smile on his face, eager to see what the next day would bring. The Alencar Industries boardroom hummed with tension. Leonardo sat at the head of the long, polished table, acutely aware of the concerned glances being exchanged by his executives. He had just finished presenting the company's quarterly report, and the numbers were not as impressive as they had been in previous years. Marcus, the CFO, cleared his throat. Leonardo, while we're still profitable, these figures show a clear downturn compared to our projections. The shareholders are getting nervous. They're starting to question your focus. Leonardo bristled at the implication. My focus is exactly where it needs to be, Marcus. We're navigating a challenging market. With all due respect, Victoria, the head of marketing, chimed in. It's not just the market. There are rumors circulating about your personal life, about some sort of family drama. It's affecting investor confidence. Leonardo's jaw clenched. He had known this moment was coming, but he had hoped to have more time to figure out how to balance his two worlds. My personal life is not up for discussion in this boardroom, he said firmly. But even as the words left his mouth, he felt a pang of guilt. The truth was, his newfound connection with the Silva family had been occupying more and more of his time and thoughts. The weekends he used to spend poring over contracts were now filled with woodworking sessions in João's old workshop. Dinners with potential clients had been replaced by warm family meals at Clara's house. As the meeting adjourned, Leonardo retreated to his office, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He stared out at the city skyline, the empire he had helped build stretching out before him, but for the first time he found himself questioning whether this was truly what he wanted. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Camilla, his longtime personal assistant. Mr. Alencar, she said hesitantly, there's something you should see. She handed him a tablet open to a financial news website. Leonardo's blood ran cold as he read the headline. Trouble at Alencar Industries? CEO's mysterious family drama raises questions about leadership. The article went on to detail rumors about Leonardo's true parentage, speculating wildly about the impact on the company's future. It was a PR nightmare, one that threatened to unravel everything he had worked for. How did this get out? Leonardo demanded, his voice tight with anger and fear. Camilla shook her head. We're not sure, sir, but the press is clamoring for a statement. What do you want me to tell them? Leonardo closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He thought of Clara's warm smile, of Sophia's unwavering support, of the peace he felt working in João's workshop. Then he thought of Carlos Alencar, of the empire they had built together, of the responsibilities he bore to his employees and shareholders. Tell them, he began, then paused. What could he say? How could he possibly explain the complex emotions and revelations of the past few weeks? Just then his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sophia. Hey, Leo. Just wanted to remind you about the family picnic this weekend. Mum's making your favorite feijoada. A small smile tugged at Leonardo's lips, despite the chaos swirling around him. In that moment, he made a decision. Camilla, he said, his voice steady. Schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. It's time I told the truth, all of it. Camilla's eyes widened. Are you sure about this, sir? The board might not. The board will have to understand, Leonardo interrupted. I can't keep living two separate lives. It's time to bring everything into the open. As Camilla left to make the arrangements, Leonardo sank into his chair, the weight of his decision settling over him. He knew that tomorrow would change everything. His relationships, his company, his entire identity as Leonardo Alencar. But as he looked at the family photo on his desk, no longer the Alencar portrait, but a candid shot of him with the Silvas, laughing over a shared meal, he felt a sense of rightness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them as his true self. Leonardo spent the rest of the day preparing for the press conference, drafting statements and anticipating questions. But as night fell and the office emptied, he found himself drawn not to his luxury penthouse, but to the modest Silva home. Clara opened the door, surprise evident on her face. Leonardo, we weren't expecting you tonight. I hope it's okay that I came, he said, suddenly feeling uncertain. I needed to be here. Clara's expression softened. She pulled him into a warm embrace. Of course it's okay. This is your home too, whenever you need it. As Leonardo sat at the kitchen table, watching Clara bustle around making tea, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for tonight he was exactly where he needed to be. "Mum," he said softly, testing out the word. Clara turned, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I think I'm ready to tell the world about us, about who I really am." Clara reached out, squeezing his hand. "Whatever you decide, whatever happens, we're here for you. Always." As the night deepened, Leonardo shared his plans with Clara, drawing strength from her unwavering support. And for the first time since the truth of his identity had been revealed, he felt truly, completely whole. Tomorrow would be a new beginning, not just for Leonardo Silva Alencar, but for a man finally ready to embrace all parts of himself, no matter the cost. The buzz of anticipation filled the grand conference room of Alencar Industries. Journalists from every major news outlet jostled for position, cameras flashing as they waited for Leonardo to make his appearance. The air was thick with speculation. What could be so important that the notoriously private CEO had called this unprecedented press conference? Behind the scenes, Leonardo stood quietly, taking deep breaths to calm his racing heart. He had spent the morning with the Silva family, drawing strength from their support. Now, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit that somehow felt foreign after weeks of casual family dinners and sawdust-covered workshop sessions, he prepared to change the course of his life forever. "Are you ready, sir?" Camilla asked softly, concern evident in her eyes. Leonardo nodded, squaring his shoulders. "As ready as I'll ever be." As he strode onto the small stage, a hush fell over the room. Leonardo took his place behind the podium, surveying the sea of expectant faces before him. He caught sight of Carlos Alencar at the back of the room, his expression unreadable. "Good morning," Leonardo began, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. "Thank you all for coming. I've called this press conference to address the rumors that have been circulating about my personal life and to set the record straight." He paused, taking a deep breath. "For my entire life I have been known as Leonardo Alencar, son of Carlos and Marisa Alencar, heir to the Alencar family legacy. But recently I discovered that this was not the whole truth." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Leonardo pressed on, his voice gaining strength. 35 years ago, a mistake was made at the hospital where I was born. Through a series of events that I'm still coming to terms with, I was given to the Alencar family, while my biological parents were told that their child had not survived. Gasps and exclamations filled the room. Cameras flashed furiously as reporters scrambled to capture every word. I recently discovered my true heritage. My biological parents are Clara and João Silva. I have siblings, Mateus, Julio, and Sofia, who I am only now getting to know. This revelation has shaken the very foundations of my identity and has forced me to re-evaluate everything I thought I knew about myself. Leonardo's gaze swept the room, noting the mix of shock, sympathy, and calculation on the faces before him. "I stand before you today not just as Leonardo Alencar, CEO of Alencar Industries, but as Leonardo Silva Alencar, a man coming to terms with a complex identity and heritage." He took another deep breath, bracing himself for the most difficult part. "I want to address the concerns that have been raised about my leadership of this company. Yes, I have been distracted in recent weeks. Yes, my priorities have shifted. But I believe that this journey of self-discovery has not weakened me as a leader. It has strengthened me." Leonardo's voice grew passionate, his eyes alight with a fire that had been missing for years. "In getting to know my biological family, I have rediscovered parts of myself that I had long neglected. I've learned the value of craftsmanship, of creating something with my own hands. I've experienced the warmth of family dinners, where the conversation matters more than the business deals being made." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "These experiences haven't distracted me from my duties. They've reminded me of why we do what we do. Alencar Industries has always prided itself on improving people's lives. Now I have a renewed understanding of what that really means." Leonardo straightened, his voice ringing with conviction. "I stand before you today as a man with a foot in two worlds, the world of high finance and corporate strategy, and the world of family, craftsmanship, and simple joys. I believe that this unique perspective will allow me to lead Alencar Industries into a new era, one where profit and human values are not at odds, but work in harmony." The room was silent, everyone hanging on his every word. "To our shareholders, I say this. I am more committed than ever to the success of this company. But that success will no longer be measured solely in profit margins and stock prices. We will become a company that values its employees as family, that sees our customers as neighbors, and that measures our worth by the positive impact we have on the world. Leonardo's gaze found Carlos at the back of the room. The older man's eyes were glistening with unshed tears. To the Alencar family, I say thank you. You raised me, you shaped me, and regardless of blood, you will always be a part of who I am. He turned back to the crowd, his voice softening. And to the Silva family, my family, I say this. I am honored to be your son, your brother. I look forward to continuing to learn from you, to grow with you, and to discover who Leonardo Silva Alencar truly is. As Leonardo opened the floor for questions, the room erupted into a frenzy of shouted inquiries and flashing cameras. He fielded each question with a newfound poise, neither hiding from the difficult topics nor shying away from his emotions. Hours later, as the last of the reporters filed out, Leonardo slumped into a chair, emotionally drained but feeling lighter than he had in years. Camilla approached, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "Sir, the board is requesting an emergency meeting, and the stock price, it's fluctuating wildly." Leonardo nodded, unsurprised. He had known there would be fallout. "Schedule the meeting for tomorrow, Camilla. For now I need to be with my family, both of them." As he left the Alencar Industries building, Leonardo was accosted by a final wave of reporters. But among the crowd, he spotted familiar faces. Clara, Sofia, Mateus and Julio, all beaming with pride. And beside them, looking uncertain but present, stood Carlos and Marisa Alencar. Leonardo felt a surge of emotion. This was his family, complex, imperfect, but real. As he joined them, fielding hugs and words of encouragement, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the strength of both his worlds behind him. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in his life, Leonardo Silva Alencar was truly, authentically himself. And that, he realized, was the greatest success of all. The day after the press conference, Leonardo woke to a world that had fundamentally shifted. His phone was inundated with messages, some supportive, others demanding explanations, and still others from opportunists seeking to capitalize on the scandal. The news channels were abuzz with analysis and speculation about the future of Alencar Industries. As he prepared for the emergency board meeting, Leonardo felt a mix of trepidation and resolve. He knew that today would be a defining moment for his leadership and the future of the company. The boardroom was tense when he entered. The members, usually composed and deferential, now regarded him with a mixture of concern, skepticism, and in some cases, barely concealed hostility. Marcus, the CFO, was the first to speak. "Leonardo, while we appreciate your honesty, you must understand the position you've put us in. Our stock price has plummeted, investors are panicking. We need to know your plan to stabilize the situation." Leonardo nodded, understanding their concerns. "I know this revelation has caused uncertainty," he began, his voice steady. "But I believe it also presents an opportunity for Alencar Industries to evolve into something greater." He laid out his vision, a company that balanced profit with social responsibility, that valued its employees as family, and that measured success not just in financial terms, but in positive impact on communities. "We've always prided ourselves on innovation," Leonardo continued. "Now it's time to innovate not just our products, but our entire corporate culture." The board members exchanged glances, some intrigued, others skeptical. Victoria, the head of marketing, leaned forward. "This could actually work in our favor," she mused. "A story of personal growth and social responsibility. If we play this right, we could attract a whole new demographic of socially conscious consumers and investors." Discussions went on for hours, debating strategies, risks, and potential outcomes. By the end, while not everyone was fully convinced, there was a cautious agreement to give Leonardo's new vision a chance. As Leonardo left the boardroom, exhausted but relieved, he found Carlos Alencar waiting for him. "That was quite a performance yesterday," Carlos said, his voice gruff. "You've thrown everything into chaos, you know." Leonardo met his adoptive father's gaze. "I had to tell the truth, Carlos. For the company, for the Silvas, for myself." Carlos was quiet for a moment, then sighed heavily. "I suppose I always knew this day might come. I'm sorry, Leonardo, for everything. The admission, so unexpected, left Leonardo momentarily speechless. Carlos had never been one to apologize or show vulnerability. "I thought I was doing what was best for you, for us," Carlos continued, "but I see now. Perhaps I was wrong." Leonardo felt a complex mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a strange sense of relief. "We can't change the past," he said softly, "but maybe we can build a better future. Together." Carlos nodded, a hint of his old determination returning to his eyes. "Well then, let's see what this new Alencar Industries of yours can do." As Leonardo left the office that evening, he felt as if a weight had been lifted. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time, he felt he was on the right path. Driving through the city, Leonardo found himself turning not towards his luxury penthouse, but towards the modest Silva neighborhood. He needed the warmth and groundedness of his biological family now more than ever. The Silva home was abuzz with activity when he arrived. Clara was in the kitchen, the aroma of her cooking filling the air. Sofia was excitedly showing Mateus and Julio something on her tablet. News coverage of Leonardo's press conference, he realized. "Leo!" Sofia exclaimed when she saw him, rushing over for a hug. "You were amazing yesterday. Everyone's talking about it." Clara emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of pride and concern. "How are you holding up, meu filho?" she asked gently. Leonardo felt a lump form in his throat at the endearment. "It's been intense," he admitted, "but I think it was the right thing to do." As they settled around the dinner table, Leonardo found himself recounting the day's events, the board meeting, the conversation with Carlos, the challenges that lay ahead. The Silvas listened attentively, offering support and occasional bits of advice. "You know," Mateus said thoughtfully, "all this talk about socially responsible business, it reminds me of Dad's approach to his carpentry. He always said that true craftsmanship was about more than just making money. It was about creating something of value, something that would improve people's lives." Leonardo nodded, a spark of inspiration igniting in his mind. "That's it exactly. Maybe there's a way to bring that spirit of craftsmanship into Alencar Industries." As the conversation flowed, ideas began to take shape. Leonardo found himself energized, scribbling notes on a napkin as his newfound family contributed thoughts and suggestions. By the time the evening wound down, Leonardo had the beginnings of a plan, a way to merge his corporate expertise with the values he'd discovered through the Silvas. It wouldn't be easy, but he felt more confident than ever that it was possible. As he prepared to leave, Clara pulled him aside. "Leonardo," she said softly, "I want you to know how proud we all are of you. Not just for your success, but for your courage in facing the truth and trying to do what's right." Leonardo felt tears prick at his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." Driving back to his penthouse, Leonardo felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he was ready to face them, not as Leonardo Alencar or Leonardo Silva, but as Leonardo Silva Alencar, a man finally comfortable with all aspects of his identity. As he drifted off to sleep that night, Leonardo's dreams were filled not with boardrooms and balance sheets, but with images of family dinners, the scent of sawdust, and the satisfaction of creating something truly meaningful. The weeks following Leonardo's public revelation were a whirlwind of activity. Alencar Industries was in a state of flux, with every department scrambling to adapt to the new direction set by their CEO. Leonardo found himself working longer hours than ever, but for the first time in years, he felt truly energized by his work. The conference room was packed for the company-wide meeting Leonardo had called. Employees from every level of the organization were present, curiosity and uncertainty evident on their faces. "Thank you all for coming," Leonardo began, his voice carrying a warmth that many of his longtime employees had never heard before. "I know the past few weeks have been turbulent, and I appreciate your patience and dedication during this time of transition." He outlined his vision for the new Alencar Industries, a company that would balance profit with purpose, that would strive to make a positive impact on the world while still delivering value to shareholders. "Our first initiative," Leonardo announced, "is the creation of the Alencar Silva Craftsmanship Program. We'll be partnering with local artisans and small-scale manufacturers to incorporate their expertise and creativity into our products." A murmur of surprise and interest rippled through the room. This was a dramatic departure from the company's previous focus on mass production and outsourcing. Additionally, Leonardo continued, we'll be implementing a profit-sharing program for all employees, not just executives. Your hard work and dedication deserve to be rewarded. The announcement was met with enthusiastic applause, though Leonardo noticed some of the higher-level executives exchanging concerned glances. As the meeting progressed, Leonardo could feel the energy in the room shifting. Many employees seemed excited about the new direction, while others appeared skeptical or worried. After the meeting, Leonardo was approached by Sarah, a longtime factory worker. Mr. Mr. Silver Alankar, she began hesitantly. I just wanted to say, I think what you're doing is really great. My father was a woodworker, and the idea that his skills might be valued in a company like this, well, it means a lot. Leonardo felt a warmth spread through his chest. Thank you, Sarah. It's feedback like this that reassures me we're on the right track. Not everyone was as supportive, however. Later that day, Leonardo found himself in a heated discussion with Ronald, the head of production. This is madness, Leonardo, Ronald insisted. Partnering with local artisans? Profit sharing? You'll drive us into the ground. We need to focus on efficiency and cost-cutting, not handicrafts. Leonardo remained calm, recalling the patience João had shown in his workshop. Ronald, I understand your concerns, but I believe this approach will actually increase our value in the long run. We'll be creating unique, high-quality products that people will be willing to pay a premium for, and happy invested employees are more productive and innovative. Ronald didn't look convinced, but he grudgingly agreed to give the new approach a try. As the days passed, Leonardo split his time between the corporate office and João's old workshop. He began inviting small groups of employees to join him there, teaching them the basics of woodworking and discussing how these skills could be integrated into their work. One evening, as Leonardo was locking up the workshop, he was surprised to see Carlos Alankar approaching. I heard about your little woodworking sessions, Carlos said, his tone unreadable. Quite a departure from your MBA training, isn't it? Leonardo tensed, preparing for an argument, but to his surprise, Carlos's expression softened. You know, the older man continued, watching you these past few weeks, it reminds me of why I fell in love with business in the first place. The creativity, the drive to build something meaningful. Leonardo blinked, caught off guard by this unexpected vulnerability from his adoptive father. Carlos cleared his throat, looking slightly uncomfortable. I was wondering, perhaps you might have room for one more student in your workshop. A slow smile spread across Leonardo's face. I think we can arrange that, he said softly. As they walked together towards their cars, Leonardo felt a sense of hope. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was beginning to see that it was possible to bridge his two worlds, to honor both his silver heritage and his Alankar upbringing. Later that night, as Leonardo shared the day's events with Clara and Sophia over a family dinner, he felt a deep sense of contentment. The corporate world was starting to understand the value of craftsmanship, and his adoptive father was taking steps to understand this new part of Leonardo's life. You know, Sophia said thoughtfully, twirling pasta on her fork, it's like you're not just running a company anymore. You're building a community. Leonardo pondered her words, realizing the truth in them. He was no longer simply chasing profits or market share. He was creating something larger, a vision of business that could bring people together, that could honor tradition while embracing innovation. As he lay in bed that night, Leonardo's mind was filled not with worry about stock prices or production quotas, but with ideas for new projects, new ways to integrate the skills of local artisans into Alankar's products. He drifted off to sleep with a smile on his face, eager to see what the next day would bring. For the first time in his life, Leonardo Silva Alankar was not just surviving in his two worlds, he was thriving, and in doing so, he was creating something entirely new. 6 months had passed since Leonardo's public revelation and the subsequent shift in Alankar Industries' direction. The company was buzzing with a new energy, but it wasn't without its challenges. Leonardo found himself constantly juggling the demands of the corporate world with his newfound commitment to family and craftsmanship. On a crisp autumn morning, Leonardo stood proudly in the company's main showroom, surrounded by the first line of products born from the Alankar Silver craftsmanship program. Elegant furniture pieces, each bearing the unmistakable touch of skilled artisans, were displayed alongside the company's more traditional offerings. Victoria, the head of marketing, approached with a tablet in hand, her eyes bright with excitement. "Leonardo, you need to see this," she said, handing him the device. "Our first quarter sales figures for the new line are in." Leonardo scanned the report, a smile spreading across his face. The artisanal products were outperforming initial projections by a significant margin. More importantly, customer feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with many praising the company's new direction. "This is fantastic," Leonardo said, feeling a surge of vindication. "Let's call a meeting to discuss how we can expand the program." As he turned to leave, he nearly collided with Ronald, the head of production, who had been skeptical of the new approach. Ronald's face was a mix of surprise and grudging respect. "I have to admit," Ronald said, gesturing to the displayed items, "I didn't think this would work, but these pieces, they're something special. And the production team is more engaged than I've seen in years." Leonardo clapped him on the shoulder. "Thank you, Ronald. Your team's adaptability has been crucial to making this work. I hope you'll continue to bring your expertise to help us refine the process." As Leonardo made his way to his office, he was stopped by numerous employees, all eager to share their thoughts and ideas for the company's new direction. The atmosphere was electric, a far cry from the staid, formal environment that had prevailed just months ago. However, the day wasn't without its challenges. As Leonardo settled into his chair, Camilla entered with a concerned look. "Sir, the shareholders' meeting is in an hour, and I've just received word that a group of major investors is planning to voice some concerns." Leonardo nodded, his excitement tempered by the reminder of the ongoing challenges. "Thank you, Camilla. I'll be prepared." The shareholders' meeting was tense from the start. While many were pleased with the positive press and customer response to the new initiative, others were worried about the long-term financial implications. "Mr. Silva Alankar," one shareholder began, his tone sharp, "while these artisanal products are generating buzz, they're also significantly more expensive to produce. How do you plan to maintain profitability in the long run?" Leonardo took a deep breath, channeling the patience he had learned in Joan's workshop. "I understand your concern," he began. "Yes, these products are more costly to produce, but they also command a higher price point and foster customer loyalty. Moreover, our employee satisfaction rates have skyrocketed, leading to increased productivity across all divisions." He went on to outline plans for scaling the program efficiently, leveraging technology to support, but not replace, artisanal techniques, and the positive impact on the company's brand value. By the end of the meeting, while not everyone was fully convinced, Leonardo had managed to assuage the most pressing concerns. As he left the boardroom, he felt the familiar weight of corporate responsibility settling back on his shoulders. That evening, Leonardo found himself not in his penthouse or at another business dinner, but in Joan's old workshop. He had promised to help Sophia with a school project, a handcrafted dollhouse that was proving more challenging than either of them had anticipated. "I don't get it, Leo," Sophia sighed, frustration evident in her voice. "In your big fancy company, you can make all these beautiful things. Why is this little dollhouse giving us so much trouble?" Leonardo chuckled, putting down his sandpaper. "Because, Minema, in the company we have years of experience and specialized tools. Here we're learning together. And sometimes that's even more valuable." As they worked side by side, Leonardo's phone buzzed incessantly with emails and messages. He glanced at it occasionally but remained focused on the task at hand, helping Sophia align a particularly tricky joint. Clara poked her head into the workshop, smiling at the sight of her two children hunched over the project. "Dinner's ready whenever you two master craftspeople are," she called teasingly. Leonardo looked up, suddenly realizing how late it had gotten. "I'm sorry, I have to go," he said, reaching for his phone. "I have a video conference with our European division and—" He stopped short, seeing the disappointment flash across Sophia's face. In that moment, Leonardo realized he was at a crossroads. The old Leonardo would have rushed off without a second thought, prioritizing business over everything else, but now— "You know what," he said, putting his phone down, "Europe can wait. Let's finish this dollhouse and have dinner as a family." Sophia's face lit up, and Leonardo felt a warmth in his chest that no business success could match. As they continued working, Sharing laughs and ideas, Leonardo reflected on how much his life had changed. Yes, running Alencar Industries was still demanding. Yes, there were still challenges to overcome and skeptics to convince. But here in this workshop, with the smell of wood shavings in the air and the sound of his sister's laughter, Leonardo knew he was exactly where he needed to be. Later that night, as he finally checked his messages and prepared for the rescheduled video conference, Leonardo felt a new sense of balance. He was learning, slowly but surely, to be both the CEO and the brother, the businessman and the craftsman. As he drifted off to sleep, the image of the unfinished dollhouse mingled with thoughts of quarterly reports and shareholder meetings. And for once, it didn't feel like a conflict but a harmony, the two sides of Leonardo Silva Alencar coming together to create something truly unique. The calm of a Saturday morning was shattered by the insistent ringing of Leonardo's phone. Groggily, he reached for it, noting with concern that it was Marcus, his CFO, calling at such an early hour. "Leonardo," Marcus's voice was tense, "we have a situation. Globetech has made a surprise bid to acquire our main competitor, Vertex Industries. If this goes through, we'll be at a significant disadvantage in the market." Leonardo sat up, sleep forgotten. Globetech was a multinational conglomerate known for its aggressive business tactics and focus on maximizing short-term profits at any cost. This move could potentially undo all the progress Alencar Industries had made in recent months. "Call an emergency board meeting," Leonardo instructed. "I'll be at the office in an hour." As he rushed to get ready, Leonardo's eyes fell on the family photo on his nightstand, a candid shot of him with the Silvers, all laughing during a recent picnic. He hesitated, then made a quick call. "Sophia, I'm sorry, but I have to cancel our plans for today. There's an emergency at work." There was a pause on the other end. "But Leo, you promised we were going to finish the tree house for the community center kids." Leonardo felt a pang of guilt. "I know, and I'm really sorry. I'll make it up to you, I promise. This is just, it's really important." He could hear the disappointment in Sophia's voice as she said goodbye. Pushing down the uncomfortable feeling, Leonardo headed to the office, his mind already racing with potential strategies. The board meeting was tense. Various executives argued for an aggressive counter-strategy, cutting costs, laying off workers, and abandoning the new artisanal line to free up resources for a bidding war. "We need to show the market that we're serious players," one board member insisted. "All this talk about craftsmanship and social responsibility is well and good, but it won't mean anything if we're pushed out of the market." Leonardo listened to all the arguments, feeling the weight of the decision on his shoulders. He could feel the old instincts rising, the cutthroat businessman who would do anything to win. It would be so easy to fall back into those patterns, to sacrifice the progress they'd made for the sake of market dominance. As the debate raged on, Leonardo's phone buzzed with a text from Clara. "Remember, mio figlio, true strength comes from staying true to your values, especially when it's difficult." Those words struck a chord. Leonardo stood, silencing the room with his presence. "I understand the gravity of the situation," he began, his voice steady, "but I want to propose a different approach. Instead of trying to outbid Globetech or resorting to layoffs, what if we reach out to Vertex Industries with a partnership proposal?" The room erupted in confused murmurs. Leonardo continued, "We've been developing a unique approach that balances profitability with social responsibility. Vertex has been struggling to differentiate itself in the market. By joining forces, we could create something truly innovative, a company that leads not just in market share, but in setting a new standard for ethical business practices." For the next several hours, Leonardo outlined his vision, drawing on everything he had learned from both his corporate experience and his time with the Silva family. He spoke of leveraging Vertex's technology with Alencar's new focus on craftsmanship, of creating a corporate culture that valued both innovation and tradition. Slowly, he could see the skepticism in the room giving way to interest and then to excitement. By the end of the day, the board had agreed to pursue Leonardo's strategy. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of negotiations, late nights, and strategic planning. Leonardo found himself drawing on skills from both sides of his life, the business acumen he'd honed over years in the corporate world, and the patience and creativity he'd discovered through his biological family. Finally, after what felt like endless rounds of talks, a deal was struck. Alencar Industries and Vertex would merge, creating a new entity that promised to revolutionize the industry. The announcement sent shockwaves through the business world, with analysts scrambling to understand this unconventional move. As Leonardo left the final signing ceremony, exhausted but triumphant, he found Sophia waiting for him outside the office. "I thought you might need this," she said, handing him a small, intricately carved wooden box. "It's no treehouse, but..." Leonardo opened the box to find a beautiful handcrafted pen inside. "Sophia, this is... Did you make this?" She nodded, a mix of pride and shyness on her face. "I've been practicing. I thought maybe the CEO of this big new company might need a special pen to sign important documents." Overcome with emotion, Leonardo pulled his sister into a tight hug. "It's perfect," he whispered. "I'm sorry I've been so busy lately. I promise we'll finish that treehouse together." Sophia grinned. "I know you will. That's who you are now, Leo. You keep your promises to your family and to the world." As they walked together, Leonardo realized that he had passed a crucial test. He had faced a major business challenge without compromising his newfound values. More than that, he had found a way to bring those values into the heart of the corporate world. The path ahead would still have its challenges, but Leonardo Silva Alencar was ready to face them. With his family's support and his rediscovered sense of purpose, he was prepared to lead his company, and perhaps the entire business world, into a new era of responsible, human-centered capitalism. As the sun set over the city skyline, Leonardo felt a deep sense of peace. He had finally found a way to be true to all parts of himself, the businessman and the craftsman, the Alencar and the Silva. And in doing so, he was creating something truly revolutionary. The bustling atrium of the newly merged Alencar Vertex headquarters was a hive of activity. Employees from both former companies mingled, some excitedly discussing new possibilities, others eyeing their new colleagues with thinly veiled suspicion. Leonardo stood on the mezzanine, observing the scene below with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" a voice said beside him. Leonardo turned to see Rebecca Chen, the former CEO of Vertex Industries, and now his co-CEO in this new venture. Leonardo nodded, offering a smile. "It's like watching two rivers merge. A bit turbulent at first, but I believe we'll create something powerful together." Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly. "Let's hope so. There's a lot riding on this unconventional approach of yours, Silva Alencar." As they made their way to the main conference room for the first joint executive meeting, Leonardo could feel the weight of expectations from all sides. The board members from both companies were present, along with key stakeholders and department heads. "Ladies and gentlemen," Leonardo began, standing at the head of the table, "today marks the true beginning of our journey together. We have a unique opportunity to redefine what a successful corporation can be in the 21st century." He outlined his vision for the merged company, a blend of Vertex's cutting-edge technology with Alencar's newfound commitment to craftsmanship and social responsibility. As he spoke, Leonardo could see a range of reactions around the table: enthusiasm, skepticism, and everything in between. Rebecca stepped in, her tone more pragmatic. "While these ideals are admirable, we must also focus on concrete steps to ensure a smooth integration and maintain our market position." The meeting stretched on for hours, with heated debates about everything from corporate culture to production methods. By the end, Leonardo felt drained but cautiously optimistic. They had made some progress, but it was clear that merging these two worlds would be no easy task. As he finally left the office that evening, Leonardo's phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. "Don't forget, you promised to help with the community center this weekend." Leonardo groaned inwardly. With all the chaos of the merger, he had completely forgotten about his commitment to help build a new recreation area for the local youth center, a project that the Silva family had been passionately involved in. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, strategy sessions, and putting out fires as inevitable clashes arose between different teams. Leonardo found himself constantly mediating between the more traditional corporate elements and those excited about the new direction. By the time Saturday rolled around, Leonardo was exhausted. As he drove to the community center, part of him wished he could just spend the day in bed. But as he pulled up and saw Sophia's excited wave, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. "Leo, you made it!" Sophia exclaimed as he got out of the car. "We weren't sure if you'd be too busy with all the merger stuff." Leonardo felt a pang of guilt at her words. "I made a promise, didn't I? Now, where do you need me?" For the next several hours, Leonardo threw himself into the work. He helped assemble playground equipment, painted walls, and even used some of his newly honed woodworking skills to create benches for the center's garden. As he worked alongside community volunteers, Leonardo found himself relaxing for the first time in weeks. Here, there were no board members to impress, no market shares to worry about. It was simply about creating something valuable for people who needed it. Midway through the day, Leonardo was surprised to see a familiar face arrive at the center. Rebecca Chen, looking somewhat out of place in her casual clothes, approached him with a bemused expression. "So this is where you disappear to on weekends," she said, taking in the scene. "Your assistant mentioned you might be here. I thought we could discuss the Henderson contract, but..." She trailed off, clearly unsure of how to proceed in this unfamiliar environment. Leonardo smiled, handing her a paintbrush. "Why don't you join us for a bit? I think you might find it illuminating." To his surprise, Rebecca hesitated only briefly before rolling up her sleeves and joining in. As they worked side by side, painting a mural designed by local kids, Leonardo saw a different side to his usually stern co-CEO. "You know," Rebecca said quietly as they took a water break, "I always thought all this community stuff was just for PR. But seeing the impact firsthand, it's something else." Leonardo nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. "This is what I've been trying to bring to our company. The idea that we can be successful while also making a real, tangible difference in people's lives." As the day wound down and they surveyed their work, Leonardo felt a sense of accomplishment that rivaled any business success. The center had been transformed, and the joy on the faces of the local kids and their families was palpable. Sophia approached, grinning widely. "See, Leo, this is what happens when you keep your promises. You don't just help us, you bring new people into our world too," she said, nodding towards Rebecca, who was chatting animatedly with some of the volunteers. Leonardo wrapped an arm around his sister's shoulders, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "You're right, as usual. Thanks for not letting me forget what's really important." As they all gathered for a group photo in front of the newly renovated center, Leonardo felt the disparate parts of his life coming together. He saw Rebecca exchanging contact information with some of the community leaders, already discussing how Alencar Vertex might support future initiatives. Driving home that evening, Leonardo's mind was buzzing with new ideas. He realized that the key to successfully merging Alencar and Vertex might lie not in boardroom strategies, but in experiences like today, in showing his colleagues the tangible impact of socially responsible business practices. With renewed energy, Leonardo began planning how to bring more of his executives into these community projects. It would be a challenge, but he was increasingly convinced that this was the path to creating a truly revolutionary company, one that could change not just the business world but the world at large. As he fell asleep that night, Leonardo's dreams were filled not with profit margins and market shares, but with images of smiling children playing in the new community center. And for once, these dreams felt more real, more valuable than any corporate victory. 6 months had passed since the merger of Alencar Industries and Vertex Technologies, and the business world was watching closely. Leonardo stood at the podium, preparing to deliver a keynote address at the annual Global Business Forum. The audience was filled with industry leaders, journalists, and curious onlookers, all eager to hear about the unconventional approach of the newly formed Alencar Vertex Corporation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Leonardo began, his voice steady and confident, "when we announced this merger, many called it a risky experiment. Today, I'm here to tell you that it's not just an experiment, it's the future of responsible business." He went on to present the company's first post-merger report. The numbers were impressive. Productivity was up, employee satisfaction had skyrocketed, and their market share had grown steadily. But more than that, Leonardo emphasized the positive impact they had made in communities where they operated. "We've established workshops in underprivileged areas, teaching traditional craftsmanship alongside cutting-edge technology. We've reduced our carbon footprint by 30% through innovative production methods. And perhaps most importantly, we've proven that it's possible to be profitable while prioritizing people and the planet." As Leonardo concluded his speech, the room erupted in applause. He could see nods of approval from some of the most respected names in the industry. It felt like a vindication of everything he had been working towards. After the forum, Leonardo found himself surrounded by reporters and fellow business leaders, all eager to learn more about Alencar Vertex's revolutionary approach. Among them was Carlos Alencar, looking both proud and slightly bewildered. "I have to admit, Leonardo," Carlos said quietly as they shared a moment alone, "I didn't think this would work, but you've managed to create something truly remarkable." Leonardo felt a warmth in his chest at his adoptive father's words. "Thank you, Carlos. That means a lot coming from you." As they chatted, Leonardo's phone buzzed with a message from Clara. "We're all watching the live stream, mio figlio. You're making us so proud. Don't forget, family dinner tonight." Leonardo smiled, feeling once again the beautiful balance he had struck between his two worlds. He was about to reply when he was approached by Evelyn Blackwell, CEO of BlackRock Enterprises, one of the largest investment firms in the world. "Mr. Silva Alencar," she said, her tone all business, "I must say, I'm impressed with what you've accomplished. In fact, I have a proposition for you. BlackRock is interested in a significant investment in Alencar Vertex, with the aim of scaling your model globally." Leonardo's heart raced. This could be the opportunity to spread their philosophy to a truly global scale. But as Evelyn outlined the details, he felt a growing unease. The deal would require them to streamline operations, potentially cutting some of their community programs and reverting to more traditional production methods in some areas. "Think about it," Evelyn said, handing him a sleek folder. "This could make Alencar Vertex a true global powerhouse. I'll need your answer by the end of the week." As Leonardo left the forum, his mind was swirling. The old Leonardo would have jumped at this chance without hesitation, but now he found himself torn. The investment could propel them to new heights, but at what cost? That evening, as he joined the Silva family for dinner, Leonardo was uncharacteristically quiet. Sophia, perceptive as ever, noticed his distraction. "What's wrong, Leo?" she asked as they cleared the table together. "You should be celebrating after that amazing speech." Leonardo sighed, then explained the situation with BlackRock. To his surprise, instead of offering advice, Sophia simply listened, then said, "You know, this reminds me of something Dad used to say. Want to take a walk to the workshop?" Curious, Leonardo followed her to Joanne's old workspace. Sophia pulled out a dusty journal from a drawer and opened it to a marked page. "Look at this," she said. Leonardo read the entry, written in Joanne's neat handwriting. "Today, I was offered a contract to mass-produce my designs. It would mean more money, but less time for craftsmanship. I realize that my true wealth is not in my bank account, but in the joy I bring to others through my work. Sometimes growing larger means growing away from what truly matters." As Leonardo read those words, he felt a clarity he had been lacking. He looked around the workshop, at the tools that had shaped not just wood, but his own understanding of value and success. "Sophia," he said, a new resolve in his voice, "I think I know what I need to do." The next day, Leonardo called a meeting with his executive team. He explained the BlackRock offer and the decision he had come to. "We're going to respectfully decline," he announced, to a mixture of gasps and nods. "Instead, I propose we launch the Alencar Vertex Foundation. We'll use a portion of our profits to fund and mentor small businesses that align with our values of craftsmanship, technology, and community responsibility." Rebecca Chen, who had become a strong ally in recent months, was the first to speak up. "It's a bold move, Leonardo, but I think it's the right one. We didn't come this far to compromise our values now." Over the next few weeks, as news of their decision spread, Leonardo braced for backlash. To his surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Other companies began reaching out, interested in partnering on community initiatives. Talented young professionals, drawn by Alencar Vertex's commitment to ethical business, flooded them with job applications. One evening, as Leonardo was leaving the office, he ran into Evelyn Blackwell in the lobby. He tensed, expecting recriminations, but she surprised him with a thoughtful look. "You know, Silva Alencar," she said, "when you turned down our offer, I thought you were making a huge mistake. But watching what you've done since then, you might just be onto something big." Leonardo smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. "We're always open to partnerships, Ms. Blackwell, just as long as they align with our core values." As he drove home that night, Leonardo reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. From the lost boy searching for his identity to the man who was now reshaping the very notion of corporate success, it had been a transformative experience. He thought of Carlos and the Alencars, who had given him the skills to navigate the business world. He thought of Clara, Sofia, and the Silva family, who had reconnected him with the values of craftsmanship and community. And he thought of João, the father he had never known whose wisdom still guided him. Leonardo Silva Alencar smiled as he pulled into the driveway of the modest house he now called home. Inside, he knew, a loving family waited, and tomorrow he would return to a company that was changing the world, one thoughtfully crafted product at a time. He had finally found his balance, his true self, and in doing so, he was creating ripples that would transform not just his own life but countless others. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But now, Leonardo was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, grounded in his dual heritage and unwavering in his commitment to a new way of doing business. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when Leonardo's phone buzzed with an urgent message. Groggily, he reached for it, his eyes widening as he read the news alert. Alencar Vertex Model Sparks Global Movement. Businesses worldwide adopting social responsibility approach. Fully awake now, Leonardo scrolled through the article. It detailed how companies across various industries were starting to implement elements of the Alencar Vertex model, from establishing local artisan partnerships to launching community development initiatives. The piece ended with a quote from a renowned economist, hailing it as a potential paradigm shift in global capitalism. As Leonardo prepared for his day, his mind raced with the implications. What had started as a personal journey to reconcile his dual heritage had somehow sparked a global conversation about the nature of business and success. At the office, the atmosphere was electric. Employees gathered around screens, excitedly discussing the news. Leonardo made his way to the conference room where the executive team was already assembled, their faces a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Well," Rebecca said as Leonardo took his seat, "it seems we've started something bigger than we anticipated. The question is, what do we do now?" The meeting that followed was one of the most intense in the company's history. They discussed everything from scaling their model to meet growing demand, to the challenges of maintaining their values in the face of rapid expansion. "We need to be careful," Marcus, the CFO, cautioned. "This kind of growth could easily lead us away from our core principles if we're not vigilant." Leonardo nodded, thinking of João's journal entry about the dangers of growing too big. "You're right. Which is why I think our next step should be education, not just expansion." He outlined a plan to establish the Alencar Vertex Institute, a think tank and training center dedicated to teaching other businesses how to implement socially responsible practices while remaining profitable. As the team debated the details, Leonardo's phone buzzed again. It was a message from Sofia. "Leo, don't forget, today's the day we're supposed to start planning Dad's memorial workshop at the community center. We're all waiting for you." Leonardo felt a pang of guilt. With all the excitement at work, he had completely forgotten about the family commitment. He glanced at the clock. The meeting could easily go on for several more hours, but his family was waiting. "I'm sorry," he said, standing up abruptly. "There's a family matter I need to attend to. Rebecca, can you lead the rest of the meeting?" Rebecca looked surprised but nodded. As Leonardo headed for the door, he could feel the questioning gazes of his team. For a moment, he hesitated. The old Leonardo would have never left such an important meeting. Was he making a mistake? But as he drove to the community center, Leonardo felt a sense of rightness settle over him. Yes, the company was important, but so was his family. Finding that balance was what had led him to success in the first place. At the center, he found Clara, Sofia, and his brothers already deep in discussion about the memorial workshop. The plan was to renovate part of the center into a space where local youth could learn woodworking skills, honoring João's legacy of craftsmanship and community service. "Leo," Sofia exclaimed when she saw him, "we weren't sure you'd make it with all the excitement about the company." "Are you kidding?" Leonardo said, pulling her into a hug. "This is exactly where I need to be." As they worked on the plans, Leonardo found himself relaxing, the stress of the morning melting away. He shared the news about the global impact of their business model, and the family celebrated together. seeing it as a validation of not just Leonardo's work, but of Joan's values that had inspired it all. "Your father would be so proud," Clara said softly, her eyes glistening with tears. "Both of you," she added, including Carlos in her gaze. Later that evening, as Leonardo was leaving the center, he ran into Mateus, who had been quiet for most of the day. "You know," Mateus said, his voice gruff but sincere, "I didn't think much of you when we first met. Thought you were just another rich guy playing at being part of our family. But seeing you today, choosing to be here instead of at some big important meeting, I think I finally get it. You're a Silver through and through." Leonardo felt a lump form in his throat. Coming from Mateus, this was high praise indeed. "Thank you," he managed to say. "That means more than you know." As he drove home, Leonardo's phone was flooded with messages, interview requests, investment offers, even a call from the mayor's office about a city-wide initiative inspired by Alencar Vertex's community programs. It was overwhelming, but for once Leonardo didn't feel torn. He had made the right choice today, honoring his commitment to family even as his professional world exploded with opportunities. It was a balancing act, one he was still learning, but he was getting better at it every day. That night, as he drifted off to sleep, Leonardo's dreams were filled with images of a world transformed, communities thriving, businesses operating with conscience, and at the center of it all, a family united by love and shared values. He slept with a smile on his face, eager to see what new challenges and opportunities the next day would bring. The Alencar Vertex headquarters was abuzz with activity as Leonardo made his way through the crowded atrium. Everywhere he looked, he saw evidence of the company's new direction, from the artisanal products displayed proudly in glass cases to the large screens showcasing their latest community initiatives. As he stepped into the elevator, Leonardo overheard two employees deep in conversation. "Did you see the news? Another major corporation just announced they're adopting our model." "I know, it's incredible. Who would have thought our little experiment would change the whole business world?" Leonardo smiled to himself, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. The past year had seen an unprecedented shift in corporate culture globally, with the Alencar Vertex model at the forefront of a new wave of socially responsible business practices. But as he entered his office, Leonardo's smile faded. Waiting for him was Rebecca, her face grave. "Leonardo, we have a situation," she said without preamble. "Greentech Industries has just announced a new line of products that directly compete with ours. They're claiming to be even more eco-friendly and socially responsible than we are." Leonardo frowned. Greentech was a major player in the industry, known for its aggressive business tactics. "What exactly are they offering?" Rebecca handed him a tablet with Greentech's press release. As Leonardo read through it, his concern grew. Greentech was promising not just eco-friendly products, but a revolutionary profit-sharing model with local communities and artisans. On the surface, it looked like everything Alencar Vertex stood for, but amplified. "This could seriously undercut us," Rebecca continued. "They're undercutting our prices too. We're already getting calls from some of our biggest clients asking if we can match Greentech's offers." Leonardo leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. This was the kind of challenge that would have once sent him into a frenzy of competitive strategizing. But now he took a deep breath, remembering the lessons he'd learned over the past year. "Before we react," he said slowly, "we need to understand exactly what Greentech is offering. Let's set up a team to analyze their model in detail, and I want to reach out to some of the communities they're claiming to partner with. Something about this doesn't feel right." Over the next few weeks, Leonardo threw himself into the investigation. He traveled to some of the regions where Greentech claimed to have community partnerships, talking directly with local artisans and workers. What he discovered was troubling. While Greentech's marketing painted a rosy picture, the reality on the ground was quite different. Their profit-sharing model was filled with loopholes that left communities with little actual benefit. Their eco-friendly claims were based on technicalities rather than substantial practices. But the real bombshell came when Leonardo met with a whistleblower from Greentech. The employee provided evidence that the company was engaged in greenwashing on a massive scale, using clever accounting tricks to make their practices appear more sustainable than they actually were. Armed with this information, Leonardo faced a difficult decision. Exposing GreenTech would protect Alencar Vertex's market position and vindicate their genuine commitment to social responsibility. But it would also likely lead to a brutal corporate battle that could damage the entire movement towards ethical business practices. As he wrestled with the dilemma, Leonardo found himself once again in Joao's old workshop. He ran his hand along the smooth wood of the workbench, remembering the lessons in integrity and craftsmanship he'd learned here. Suddenly, an idea began to form. What if, instead of exposing GreenTech publicly, they reached out to collaborate? It was a risky move, but it aligned with the principles of community and cooperation that were at the heart of Alencar Vertex's philosophy. The next day, Leonardo presented his plan to the executive team. There were plenty of objections and concerns, but in the end they agreed to trust his judgment. Leonardo personally reached out to the CEO of GreenTech, proposing a joint initiative to develop truly sustainable and community-friendly business practices. To his surprise, the CEO agreed to a meeting. What followed was one of the most challenging negotiations of Leonardo's career. For days, the two companies' teams worked tirelessly, hashing out a framework for genuine cooperation and accountability. In the end, they emerged with something revolutionary, a partnership that would set new standards for corporate responsibility and transparency. GreenTech agreed to overhaul its practices, with Alencar Vertex providing guidance and oversight. The announcement of the partnership sent shockwaves through the business world. Some critics called it naive, but many hailed it as a turning point in corporate culture. As Leonardo stood on stage with the GreenTech CEO officially launching their joint initiative, he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. This wasn't just about protecting Alencar Vertex's interests, it was about staying true to the values that had guided him on his journey. Later that evening, as he shared the news with his family over dinner, Leonardo felt a profound sense of gratitude. The Silva family's warmth and values, combined with the business acumen he'd gained from the Alencars, had led him to this moment. Sophia, ever perceptive, raised her glass in a toast. To Leonardo, she said, her eyes shining with pride, who taught the business world that true success comes not from defeating your rivals, but from lifting everyone up together. As the family clinked glasses, Leonardo realized that this was his true legacy, not just changing a company, but helping to change the very nature of business itself. And as he looked around at the faces of his loved ones, he knew that no corporate success could ever match the richness of the life he had found. The journey wasn't over. There would always be new challenges and opportunities. But Leonardo Silva Alencar was ready to face them, grounded in his dual heritage and committed to a vision of business that could truly make the world a better place. The early morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Leonardo's home office, illuminating the array of awards and accolades that now adorned his shelves. Among them, a framed magazine cover proclaimed him Businessman of the Year, while another heralded Alencar Vertex as the company reshaping global capitalism. Leonardo sat at his desk, absently running his fingers over the smooth wood grain, a habit he'd picked up from his time in Joao's workshop. His attention was focused on the email open on his computer screen, an invitation to deliver a keynote address at the World Economic Forum in Davos. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Sophia poked her head in, a steaming mug of coffee in hand. "Thought you might need this," she said, placing the mug on his desk. "You've been holed up in here since dawn." Leonardo smiled gratefully at his sister. "Thanks, Sophie, just trying to wrap my head around this Davos invitation." Sophia's eyes widened. "Davos? Leo, that's incredible. You'll be speaking to some of the most powerful people in the world." "That's what worries me," Leonardo admitted. "The stakes keep getting higher. Sometimes I wonder if we're really making the difference we set out to make, or if we're just becoming another corporate buzzword." Sophia perched on the edge of the desk, her expression thoughtful. "You know, this reminds me of something Dad used to say. He'd tell us, it's not about how many people know your name, it's about how many lives you've touched. Maybe instead of worrying about the big stage, you should focus on the real impact you're having." Leonardo nodded slowly, feeling some of the tension ease from his shoulders. "You're right, as usual. I think I need to get out of this office and see that impact firsthand." Over the next few weeks, Leonardo embarked on a journey that took him far from the corporate boardrooms and glitzy award ceremonies. He visited small towns where Alencar Vertex's community programs had taken root, speaking with local artisans and entrepreneurs who had benefited from their initiatives. In a remote village, he met Maria, an elderly weaver whose traditional designs were now being incorporated into Alencar Vertex products, bringing her work to a global audience. "You've given us more than money," Maria told him, her weathered hands still deftly working at her loom. "You've given us dignity and a connection to the world." Further north, Leonardo visited a former industrial town that had been revitalized by one of their tech education programs. He sat in on a coding class where teenagers, many from underprivileged backgrounds, were learning skills that could shape their futures. Each story, each face reminded Leonardo of why he had embarked on this journey in the first place. It wasn't about accolades or speaking at prestigious forums. It was about creating real, tangible change in people's lives. As his trip drew to a close, Leonardo found himself back in his hometown, standing outside the community center where it had all begun. The building had been expanded, now housing not just João's memorial workshop, but also a thriving innovation hub that combined traditional craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. Inside, he was surprised to find Carlos Alencar, surrounded by a group of young apprentices. The older man was showing them how to use a 3D printer to create precision components for their woodworking projects. "Leonardo," Carlos called out, his face lighting up, "come meet our future innovators." As Leonardo joined the group, he was struck by the seamless blend of old and new, of Alencar innovation and silver craftsmanship. It was everything he had hoped for, brought to life in this small community center. Later, as he and Carlos shared a quiet moment, his adoptive father placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've created something remarkable, son," Carlos said, his voice thick with emotion. "Something far beyond what I ever imagined for Alencar Industries. You've honored both your families in ways I never thought possible." Leonardo felt a lump form in his throat. "Thank you," he managed to say. "That means more than you know." That evening, as Leonardo sat down to finally draft his Davos speech, he felt a newfound clarity. He wouldn't be speaking about profit margins or market expansion. Instead, he would tell the stories of Maria, of the young coders, of the revitalized communities. He would challenge the world's business leaders to see beyond the bottom line and recognize the true potential of ethical, community-centered business practices. As he wrote, Leonardo felt the presence of both his fathers, Carlos Alencar and João Silva, guiding his words. He was no longer torn between two worlds, but had found a way to honor and integrate both legacies into something new and powerful. The speech took shape, not as a lecture from a successful CEO, but as a heartfelt call to action from a man who had seen firsthand the transformative power of compassionate capitalism. As the sun rose on another day, Leonardo finally set down his pen. He had found his message, one that would carry the wisdom of João's workshop and the innovation of Alencar Industries to the world stage. But more importantly, he had reaffirmed his own commitment to the path he had chosen. The weight of his legacy no longer felt like a burden, but like a gift, one that he was ready to share with the world. The World Economic Forum in Davos was a whirlwind of activity. World leaders, business tycoons, and thought leaders from every corner of the globe gathered in the picturesque Swiss town, their discussions shaping the future of the global economy. Amidst this rarefied atmosphere, Leonardo Silva Alencar stood backstage, taking deep breaths to calm his nerves. "You've got this, Leo," Sophia's voice came through his earpiece. She had insisted on being there virtually, providing moral support from halfway across the world. "Just speak from your heart, like we practiced." Leonardo smiled, grateful for his sister's unwavering support. As he heard his name announced, he squared his shoulders and stepped onto the stage. The auditorium was packed, every eye fixed on him. In that moment, he was acutely aware of the journey that had brought him to this point, from the lost boy searching for his identity to the man now poised to challenge the very foundations of global capitalism. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and clear, "I stand before you today not just as the CEO of Alencar Vertex, but as someone who has witnessed firsthand the transformative power of ethical, community-centered business practices." Over the next hour, Leonardo shared the stories he had gathered on his recent journey of Maria the Weaver, of the young coders in the revitalized industrial town, of the innovation hub in his hometown, He spoke of the lessons learned from his two fathers, the business acumen of Carlos Alencar, and the craftsmanship and community values of João Silva. "We stand at a crossroads," he continued, his passion evident in every word. "We can continue down the path of profit at any cost, or we can choose to build a new kind of capitalism, one that uplifts communities, honors traditional skills, and paves the way for genuine innovation." As Leonardo concluded his speech, calling for a global commitment to compassionate capitalism, the auditorium erupted in applause. The energy in the room was electric, with many attendees on their feet. In the days that followed, Leonardo's speech became the talk of the forum. Business leaders sought him out, eager to learn more about the Alencar Vertex model. Policymakers engaged him in discussions about how to incentivize socially responsible business practices on a global scale. But it wasn't just the powerful and influential who were moved by Leonardo's words. As clips of his speech spread across social media, people around the world began sharing their own stories of community-centered business initiatives. The hashtag, or compassionate capitalism, trended globally, sparking debates and inspiring grassroots movements. Amidst the whirlwind of attention, Leonardo found a quiet moment to call home. The Silva family had gathered to watch his speech together, and their pride was palpable even through the phone line. "Mio figlio," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've taken the best of both your fathers and created something beautiful. João would be so proud." As the forum came to a close, Leonardo was approached by a group of young entrepreneurs from various developing countries. They shared their visions for businesses that could uplift their communities while preserving cultural traditions. Leonardo listened intently, offering advice and encouragement. In their passion and determination, he saw echoes of his own journey. On the flight home, as the Alps faded into the distance below, Leonardo reflected on the whirlwind of the past few days. He had gone to Davos hoping to make an impact, but he hadn't anticipated the overwhelming response. It was clear that his message had struck a chord, tapping into a deep-seated desire for a more equitable and compassionate form of capitalism. As the plane began its descent, Leonardo's thoughts turned to the future. The speech in Davos wasn't an endpoint, but a new beginning. There would be challenges ahead, skeptics to convince, systems to change, and the constant balance to maintain between global impact and local connection. But as he thought of the family waiting for him, both the Silvas and the Alencars, and the team at Alencar Vertex eager to push their vision further, Leonardo felt ready for whatever lay ahead. He had found his purpose, bridging worlds and showing that business could be a force for good. The plane touched down, and Leonardo stepped out into the warm sunlight. In the distance, he could see a small crowd waiting, Sofia, Clara, and to his surprise, Carlos Alencar, all waving excitedly. And just beyond them, a group of local artisans and community members held a banner that read, "Welcome home, Leonardo. Thank you for sharing our story with the world." As he walked towards them, Leonardo felt a profound sense of belonging. He was no longer caught between two worlds, but had found a way to unite them, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. The journey ahead would be challenging, the responsibility immense. But with the wisdom of João's workshop, the innovation of Alencar Industries, and the love of his family guiding him, Leonardo Silva Alencar was ready to lead the way towards a more compassionate and equitable future. As he embraced his family and greeted the community members, Leonardo knew that this was just the beginning. The true work of transforming global capitalism lay ahead, but he was no longer alone in the fight. He had sparked a movement, and together they would reshape the world of business, one compassionate decision at a time. The years following Leonardo's groundbreaking speech at Davos were a whirlwind of activity and change. The concept of compassionate capitalism had taken root, spreading far beyond the boardrooms of Alencar Vertex. Across the globe, businesses both large and small were beginning to adopt elements of the model Leonardo had championed. On a bright spring morning, Leonardo found himself standing in the bustling streets of Nairobi, Kenya. He was there to inaugurate the first African branch of the Alencar Vertex Institute, a center dedicated to teaching sustainable and community-centered business practices. As he cut the ribbon, surrounded by eager local entrepreneurs and community leaders, Leonardo felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was tangible proof that his vision was making a real difference, far beyond the borders of his home country. Mr. Silva Alencar, a young woman approached him after the ceremony, her eyes shining with determination. Your speech in Davos inspired me to start my own socially responsible business. Now with this institute, I feel like I have the tools to really make it work. Leonardo smiled warmly, touched by her words. What's your business idea? He asked. The woman, Amina, explained her plan for a company that would employ local artisans to create high-quality, eco-friendly products for the global market. As she spoke, Leonardo was struck by how her vision mirrored his own journey, blending tradition with innovation. Amina, he said, placing a hand on her shoulder, I think you're onto something remarkable. Let's talk more about how we can support your venture. That evening, as Leonardo video-called his family to share the day's events, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. Sofia and Clara listened intently as he described the inauguration and his meeting with Amina. You know, Leo, Sofia said thoughtfully, it's amazing to see how Dad's values have spread so far, from his little workshop to the other side of the world. Leonardo nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. I wish he could see this, he said softly. Clara smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. He does see it, mio figlio. Through you, through every life you touch. As the weeks passed, Leonardo traveled from country to country, overseeing the establishment of more institutes, partnering with local businesses, and speaking at conferences. The Alencar Vertex model was being adapted and implemented in diverse cultures and economies, each putting their own unique spin on the concept of compassionate capitalism. In India, he visited a tech startup that had incorporated traditional handicrafts into cutting-edge smart home devices. In Brazil, he toured a sustainable agriculture project that was revitalizing rural communities while producing high-quality organic products for the global market. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. In some countries, Leonardo faced resistance from entrenched business interests who saw his ideas as a threat to their profit margins. There were skeptics who claimed that compassionate capitalism was just a passing trend, a feel-good facade that couldn't survive in the real business world. Leonardo met these challenges head-on, armed with data showing the long-term benefits of socially responsible business practices. He engaged in debates, wrote articles, and continued to lead by example through Alencar Vertex's own initiatives. One particularly memorable moment came during a heated panel discussion at an international business forum. A critic had just finished a scathing attack on Leonardo's ideas, dismissing them as naive and economically unsound. As Leonardo took the microphone to respond, he felt a calm certainty settle over him. He thought of Juone's workshop, of the community center back home, of Amina in Nairobi and countless others like her around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady and clear, I stand before you not as a naive idealist, but as a pragmatic businessman who has seen firsthand the power of compassionate capitalism. Our model isn't about sacrificing profit for feel-good initiatives. It's about recognizing that true sustainable profit comes from creating value, not just for shareholders, but for communities, for the environment, for the world we all share. He went on to present case studies, hard data, and projections that showed how socially responsible businesses were outperforming their traditional counterparts in the long run. By the end of his rebuttal, even some of his harshest critics were nodding thoughtfully. As Leonardo left the stage, he was approached by the CEO of a major multinational corporation, one that had been known for its ruthless business practices. Silva Alencar, the man said, extending his hand, I came here today prepared to dismiss your ideas, but I have to admit, you've given me a lot to think about. Perhaps it's time for my company to reconsider our approach. Leonardo shook his hand, feeling a surge of hope. This was why he continued to fight, to travel, to spread his message. Every mind changed, every business transformed, was a step towards a better world. That night, as he lay in his hotel room, Leonardo reflected on how far he had come. From a lost boy struggling with his identity to a global leader reshaping the very nature of business. He thought of Carlos Alencar and João Silva, the two fathers whose legacies he had united and expanded upon. With a smile, Leonardo reached for his tablet. He had an idea for a new initiative, one that would take the principles of compassionate capitalism even further. As he began to type, he felt that familiar surge of excitement and purpose. The journey wasn't over. In many ways, It felt like it was just beginning. But Leonardo Silva Alencar was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in his identity and committed to his vision of a better world through better business. 10 years had passed since Leonardo's fateful encounter with Sofia on the church steps. The world had changed dramatically in that time, and Leonardo Silva Alencar had been at the forefront of much of that change. Compassionate capitalism was no longer a radical idea, but a widely accepted business philosophy, taught in business schools and implemented by companies around the globe. On a warm summer evening, Leonardo stood in the garden of the Silva family home, surrounded by both his biological and adoptive families. The occasion was bittersweet. They had gathered to celebrate Clara's 70th birthday, but it was also the anniversary of João's passing. As Leonardo looked around at the faces of his loved ones, he felt a profound sense of belonging. Carlos and Marisa Alencar were deep in conversation with Mateus and Julio, while Sofia played with her young children on the lawn. Clara sat in a rocking chair, the very one Leonardo had completed in João's workshop all those years ago, watching over the scene with a contented smile. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Rebecca, Leonardo's longtime business partner and now close friend, approached with 2 glasses of wine. Leonardo accepted the glass with a smile. "Just marveling at how life comes full circle," he said. 10 years ago, I never could have imagined this." Rebecca nodded, her eyes scanning the gathering. "You've built something remarkable, Leonardo, not just in business, but here, with your family." As the evening wore on, Leonardo found himself drawn to João's old workshop, now preserved as a sort of family museum. As he ran his hand along the worn workbench, he felt a presence beside him. "He would be so proud of you, meu filho," Clara said softly, joining him in the workshop. Both of them would. Leonardo turned to his mother, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I hope so," he said. "There were times I wasn't sure I was doing the right thing." Clara took his hand, her eyes shining with love and pride. "The right thing isn't always the easy thing. But you've stayed true to yourself, to your values. That's what matters." Their moment was interrupted by Sofia, who poked her head into the workshop. "Leo, there's someone here to see you," she said, a mysterious smile playing on her lips. Curious, Leonardo followed his sister out to the garden. There, standing somewhat nervously among the party guests, was Amina, the young entrepreneur he had met in Nairobi all those years ago. "Amina!" Leonardo exclaimed, genuinely delighted. "What a wonderful surprise!" Amina smiled broadly, gesturing to a group of people behind her. "I hope you don't mind us crashing the party, Mr. Silva Alencar. But when Sofia told me about this gathering, I knew it was the perfect opportunity." Leonardo looked past Amina to see a diverse group of individuals. He recognized some of them as entrepreneurs he had mentored over the years, from various parts of the world. "We wanted to thank you," Amina continued, her voice filled with emotion, "not just for the business advice or the financial support, but for showing us that it's possible to do well by doing good." One by one, the entrepreneurs stepped forward, sharing stories of how Leonardo's guidance and the principles of compassionate capitalism had transformed not just their businesses but their communities. As Leonardo listened, deeply moved, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see Carlos Alencar, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You've surpassed everything I ever dreamed for you," Carlos said, his voice gruff with emotion. "You've taken the Alencar name and made it stand for something far greater than I ever imagined." Leonardo embraced his adoptive father, feeling the last pieces of his identity falling into place. He was Leonardo Silva Alencar, a product of 2 families, 2 legacies, united into something unique and powerful. As the night drew to a close, Leonardo found himself once again in the workshop. This time, he wasn't alone. Sofia, her children, and several of the young entrepreneurs had gathered around as Leonardo began to tell the story of João Silva and his craftsmanship. As he spoke, Leonardo picked up a piece of wood and began to work it, his hands moving with the skill and confidence he had developed over the years. The children watched in fascination, and Leonardo saw in their eyes the same spark of creativity and purpose that had driven him. In that moment, Leonardo realized that this was his true legacy. Not just the global business empire or the revolution in corporate philosophy, but this, the passing on of values, of skills, of a vision for a better world. As he looked around at the rapt faces, At the blending of old and new, of family and friends from around the world, Leonardo felt a deep sense of peace. He had found his place in the world, bridging cultures and generations, business and community. The journey hadn't always been easy, but standing here, in João's workshop, surrounded by the fruits of his labor, both the tangible and the intangible, Leonardo knew that every step had been worth it. As he continued to work the wood, telling stories of both his father's, of his mother's, of the adventures and challenges that had shaped him, Leonardo Silva Alencar felt profoundly grateful. He had not just found himself, he had created something new, something that would continue to grow and change the world long after he was gone. And in the gentle whir of the lathe and the eager questions of the children, in the laughter from the garden and the warm glow of family and friendship, Leonardo heard the echo of a simple truth, that the greatest success comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we create, what we share, and how we touch the lives of others. It was, he realized, the perfect culmination of both his heritages, the Alencar drive for success and the Silva commitment to community. And as he looked towards the future, Leonardo knew that the story was far from over. It was, in many ways, just beginning.